time was the doctor family. So naturally, my uncles called frantic, and I had to take her to my uncle's place. While I was negotiating the airport, Accra Mall junction, at that time, I don't think we have the mall yet. I saw a police officer beckoning to me, and I think I did not understand his direction. I think he was trying to tell me to stop, but it rather looked like he was asking me to proceed or to speed up. And so I stepped on the accelerator. And when I crossed the traffic light, I saw a police rider following me. And so I parked by the side. The police officer came by very angry. He said, "They tried to stop you." I said, "Well, I did not understand the signs," because it seemed as if he was beckoning me to speed up. And so he said I should wait for the police officer. Mind you, at this time, we're hearing that my cousin is dying, so we're panicking, my mother and I. The police officer came by and started talking to me, and my mother explained to her, "I'm a doctor, there's an emergency, somebody's life is on the line, and we need to rush there." The police officer said, "Oh, you guys, blah, 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 you like flaunting the law, XYZ. And I gave him my license respectfully. I said, "Mr. Officer, this is my license. Please hold on to it. I know I'm in trouble. Let me take my mother to go see my cousin, and I'll be back so we can resolve whatever issue it was." The police officer said, I think he detected at that point that I had stayed outside. So said, "You people come from outside." And, I think he was probably having a frustrated day as well. All I remember was my mother screaming at me, standing outside the car in front of the police officer, and my mother screaming, "You have such a bad temper." She was speaking to me. "You have such a bad temper." And I looked at her very surprised. And I don't even remember getting out of the car. So long story short, he wrote a note to me. I sat in the car, and then I drove her to where we needed to go to. I remember getting there, picking up my cousin as if he was just a piece of paper, throwing him around across my neck and taking him upstairs. My point I'm making is, apparently I had lost my temper so badly that if my mother hadn't screamed at me, I probably would have gotten into an altercation with a police officer. But I was surprised at his statement that you have a bad temper, because there were three things that I did not like in my life. One was bullies. Two was cheats and liars. And three was people who had tempers. And so to find her confront me and call me somebody who had a temper, I found really surprising and shocking. Anyway, I was much too young to do any proper reflection, so I ignored it. A couple of years down the line, while I was acclimatized in Ghana, I had public service quite a bit, had gone out to Korea to study, come back. I was on a phone call with my girlfriend, who was Korean at that time, and I was driving from Cape Coast. Once again, for some funny reason, I looked at my speedometer, and I remember I was going about 60, 65. But there was a guy in another car, a black car, who sped by me and sped on. Now, I came across a police stop, and these police officers stopped me. And then this police officer started insisting that I had been going 80. Now, if I had not looked at the speedometer, I probably would have thought I made a mistake. I didn't realize my foot was heavy on the pedal. But because I had looked at the speedometer, I was dead sure that I was not going 80. And so in between arguing, I lost it. His supervisor realized how angry I was, came, grabbed my license from him, and gave it back to me. Then I continued driving. I continued driving for about 20 minutes before I remembered, crap, I was talking to my girlfriend. This whole time, the girl had been quiet. And so I got back on I said, "Hello, dear, how you doing?" And I can still remember the clarity of her voice as she said,
I just need to mute everyone.
I think
Can I go on now? Hello? Okay.
Yes, please, you can go on.
All right. So I remember the clarity of her voice as she said, honey, don't you ever be angry with me like that again. And I don't ever want to see you get that angry again. I was so embarrassed. I was so surprised at myself. I was so disappointed at myself because I had petrified her. This was the beginning of my journey into self-reflection. Somebody who despised and detested people who had a temper actually had one and wasn't even aware. And that brings me to the importance of today's topic. So why is this topic important? First and foremost, I believe that your inability to control your emotions is a bigger risk than most risks most companies have in their risk register. And it's much bigger when the person in question is a leader. Emotions can create conflict, misunderstanding, and anarchy. And I believe that emotional intelligence is the best way to mitigate that risk, and the scarcity of it has created toxic environments, costly mistakes, and terrible, terrible, terrible bosses in a lot of environments that are not moving corporate environments or corporate organizations forward. So what is emotional intelligence? What do we call emotional intelligence? I will take a stab and use my own definition here. There are a lot of definitions out there that you can find, but I'll try and take a stab at it my way. I would say that emotional intelligence is your ability to become self-aware, to take stock of your emotions, and to catalog the primary and secondary triggers that evoke them. I would also say it is your ability to manage those emotions proactively and to become sensitive to other people's emotions and well-being through empathy. I'll go a step further and define what I call being emotionally adept as your ability to influence outcomes around you by the way you respond, not react to events, relate with others, and motivate, whether intrinsically or extrinsically, those in your charge. Let me say that definition again. I believe that emotional intelligence is your ability to become self-aware through reflection and to take stock of your emotions and catalog the primary and secondary triggers that evoke them. It is also your ability to manage those emotions proactively and to become sensitive to other people's emotions and well-being through empathy. I will define being emotionally adept, which is being skilled at emotional intelligence or being skilled at managing emotions, as your ability to influence outcomes around you by the way you respond, not react to events. Relate with others and motivate, whether intrinsically or extrinsically, those in your charge as a leader. And this is powerful for any leader. Because you see, as the best-selling author John Maxwell will say, leadership is influence. Leadership is a people business. And what separates people from robots are emotions. And so your ability to manage these emotions, to influence these emotions, to take charge of these emotions, to understand them, both within you and with the people around you that you lead, is a powerful, powerful, powerful tool. So I'm sure most of you can basically understand how dangerous it is, risky it is, and counterproductive it is to promote people into leadership positions without taking time to help them on the journey of self-awareness, self-discovery, and helping them to build their emotional intelligence as a whole. And I would love for some of you to put in the chat box if you've ever had a boss who was emotionally unintelligent, or if you've had terrible bosses or worked in a toxic environment where nobody understands, empathizes with you, or connect with your feelings in any way. Now, emotional intelligence involves recognizing and managing one's own emotions and understanding and empathizing with the emotions of others. So leaders with high emotional intelligence can build strong relationships. They can also handle conflicts. They can also inspire and motivate their team members. And this is basically what emotional intelligence is. Now let's talk about soft skills. If you do a cursory survey or you do some research on 2003's most in-demand soft skills, especially for leaders, you will find that besides emotional intelligence, which is one key one, there's communication, there's time management, there's resilience, there's adaptability, there's problem solving, there's decision making, there's collaboration, there's empathy, and there's coaching and mentoring. I will have you know that each one of these soft skills actually has at its base emotional intelligence. Recently, I released a book that I wrote, and I'm actually working on another one, The Never-Ending Journey of Leadership, 30 Tips to Unleash the Great Leader in You. And the book I released before was 30 Tips on Becoming a Better Communicator, from buzzword to engagement. And one of the tips, clearly, I state the role of emotional intelligence in your ability to communicate. You see, communication is basically moving a message from a sender to a destination in a format that is understood, right? And in order to evoke feedback, all right? That's the logical, way that communication works. A lot of times we test to make sure, okay, is there a sender? Yeah, great. We test to see, okay, is there a receiver? Awesome. Are the channels open? Great. Is there feedback? Okay. But the one thing most of the time we forget is whether there are barriers, communication barriers, or there is noise. And when you look at communication barriers, they can be physiological, they can be psychological, they can be language barriers. But I think one of the crucial ones that a lot of times we find triggering is emotions, emotional barriers. And that's why in the 7 C's, when we talk about communication, we talk about the 7 C's. One of the key things we talk about, besides clarity, completeness, conciseness, and all that, and coherence, is courtesy. Because when you're not courteous in the way you communicate, most of the time, people are hearing you, but they're not listening. Or they are listening, but they're not understanding, because there's a barrier that blocks them. And so your ability to empathize with the person that you speak to, first of all, makes you considerate, which is one of the C's. It allows you to analyze that audience that you're engaging. It allows you to connect with them, especially when you're doing public speaking and as such. And so emotional intelligence allows you to even communicate much, much, much better with people than you would if you didn't have any emotional intelligence. And as a leader, it allows you to motivate, evoke emotion, connect with your people, push the change that happens. And sometimes when you're not getting that change, or sometimes we're not getting those results, it's because you lack emotional intelligence. How does emotional intelligence affect time management? Okay. Now, I would recommend that all of you watch this TEDx talk by Rory Vaden. Beautiful TEDx talk. He talks about multiplying time, and he talks about it in 3 different dimensions. I'm not going to go too much into the talk. One of the things he talks about, which I agree with, is the fact that time management is actually emotional. Why is that the case? Because there's what logically you put down. For example, I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to do these 5 things on my desk, I'm going to go for lunch at this time, I'm going to close at 5, and I'm done. You can have a beautiful to-do list. However, all it takes is for one person to guilt trip you, and if you don't know how to manage that guilt trip or put things in perspective, you change your entire program for that one person. Now, that's not a bad thing, and I'm not saying you don't have compassion. But the truth is, every time you say yes to something you did not plan, you're saying no to multiple other things. And so when you put it in perspective, maybe the yes you're saying to the last minute planning or the last minute suggestion may cause you to miss out on a deadline that you planned with somebody 5 years ago or 4 years ago or 2 weeks ago, which then inconveniences that person, and it's not showing empathy to that person. So if you're emotionally intelligent, you know how to find a balance with the things you say yes to and the things you say no to. Emotional intelligence also teaches you to empathize with people that may be waiting for you or meeting you at a meeting. And so you're not late because you know that is a sign of disrespect. And so emotional intelligence is very, very, very connected to your ability to stick to the time that you've set and to managing your time as a whole. Emotional intelligence also helps you even with the way you deal with stress, which makes you efficient and deal with time even better. Let me not belabor about time management. Let's talk about resilience. Your ability to even be resilient comes from your ability to reflect, manage your emotions, manage your stress through emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence can help you to become much more adaptable. It can help you to solve problems better. How, you would say? Well, I'll tell you this. When you solve problems, whether you believe it or not, sometimes emotions affect your ability to make decisions. And if those emotions, you're not intelligent about them and you don't think thoroughly about them, you may make the wrong decisions or you may solve the problem in the wrong way. For example, if you find yourself frustrated and you're trying to solve a problem, you're more likely to cut corners rather than go through the proper process of problem solving. Checking to see if it's the best solution, checking to see if it's thorough, making sure that you test to make sure the problem won't occur, and so forth and so on. Emotional intelligence affects collaboration. Emotional intelligence at its heart has empathy. And emotional intelligence affects the way, as leaders, we coach and mentor people. And so, like I said before, emotional intelligence is one of the core 10 leadership soft skills that leaders need in 2023. However, it can be found steeped in all the other 9. So it's probably one of the most, if not the most critical skill of any leader today and yonder. And especially now that we have artificial intelligence doing half the thinking for us, artificial intelligence doing half the processing for us, the way to guarantee your job is to be a better leader and be a leader that can manage emotions the way no computer or software can. So I think I've been clear about why emotional intelligence is important and what it is. Now let's go into how to start the journey of emotional intelligence. I don't want to spend too much time talking. I want to make sure that we have a lot more questions than talking. So I'll try to keep this short. So how do you start the journey of emotional intelligence? First and foremost, you start with reflection. Reflection. Your ability to reflect on the day before, your ability to reflect on the things that have occurred, your ability to reflect on the conflict you have, your ability to reflect on the engagement you have, put you in a better position to manage, to first of all, become self-aware and to manage your emotions. Sometimes you may have had an amazing day, no conflict, no issue. But when you go through reflection through the day, you may realize that, wait a minute, I interrupted this person when they were talking. I stepped on this person's toe. I was not fair to this particular person. I basically chewed this person out in public and hurt her feelings. I was not considerate of this person who was trying to talk. Emotional intelligence, self-awareness, reflection allows you to look at this from a bird's eye view and commit to doing better. Let's go back to the next step. And I see here from the polls that a lot of people say they've had bad bosses. For those of you who say you've never had terrible bosses, God bless you, you're lucky. But I believe that most people have had terrible bosses. I think 20 out of 29 say, 69% of them say we've had terrible bosses. So for the 31%, you're lucky, but for the 69%, I'm sure you can relate to what I'm talking about. The next thing when it comes to how to start the journey of emotional intelligence is journaling. Okay, now journaling is very important. And I know some of the gentlemen here will probably say, I mean, in the past, we used to say, oh, it's a ladies thing, or we guys don't journal, but it's actually important for everybody to journal. As you can see here, I have my little diary/journal here. Actually, it's fingerprinted, so I can lock it, and I use it to put my thoughts down or reflect. Now, here's how I need you to journal when it comes to emotional intelligence. First and foremost, you need to write down every event that occurred. Event, whether you reacted or responded. So reacting is basically giving back without thinking. Responding is taking your time to give the appropriate, feedback or action, right? So put reacted or responded. If you were angry, you were sad, you were miserable, you were happy, and please, in the chat page, if you could put down all the different emotions that you know, please put it down so we can explore them. You write down what triggered it, okay? So for example, I'm excited right now. Why am I excited? Because I'm talking to all of you. I love it when I share knowledge, so I'm really excited right now. I'm also excited, why? Because this is a program that Sheila is running, and Sheila is one of my Mihima queens. So whenever I see any of my Mihima ladies, I get excited, right? So I know those are my triggers. And because those are my triggers, I like to spend more time with my Mihima ladies. I like to spend more time engaging them, right? I know that I detest bullies. I know that I detest people who lie. I know that I detest cheats. And so as much as possible, I avoid keeping the company of people like that because I do not want to be triggered. Okay, so that's me identifying my triggers. And these triggers can be primary or secondary. What's the difference? A primary trigger is what in itself is triggering you to respond with that emotion. A secondary trigger is something that you think is the trigger, but it's not really the trigger. It's based on another trigger. So for a long time, I had to, until I became emotionally intelligent, I used to get angry when people call me by my full name. And I didn't know why, but I just got angry, And then I found out later that when I reflected on it, that I felt like they were being rude, okay? But they were not being rude. They were calling my full name. The problem was when I was a child, whenever I was naughty, my mother called me with my full name. And so when anybody calls me with that full name, it took me back to childhood. It kicked in, right? And so I could see you, this person, acting like my mother, screaming at me. And so it brought back that emotion. But when I started reflecting on it and I started managing it, it stopped affecting me. Well, I won't say 100%, but at least I'm better with dealing with it, right? So you need to know those primary and secondary triggers. And the way to know them is by journaling them. So every time that you have an emotion, you journal them. And you journal them so that you know how to find your happy place. So for example, when I'm stressed out, I know when I watch a movie or I read a good book or I listen to a good audio or I have a great conversation, it fires me and levels me off. So those are good triggers that send me to a happy place, right? And if I'm a leader or I'm a boss or I have people working with me and for any reason I'm not in a good mood and I have to have a meeting with them, I have to find 20 minutes to go to that happy place before I meet them because I don't want to be negative to them because I'm having a bad day, right? On the flip side, if I also see things that are triggers that are probably going to trigger me, I try to avoid them, okay? Besides, so journaling really helps for you to identify and catalog and find these things so you can manage them better, right? Now, once you have done that, the next thing is to practice through application. So apply these things I'm saying. Apply going towards the good triggers. Apply avoiding the good triggers. Apply using the right triggers. And apply also taking your time to analyze so you respond. So maybe you can sit down and say, okay, you know what? Today it took me 5 minutes when somebody triggered me to respond. Now I'll hold my anger for 10 minutes and see how it goes. Next time I'm going to hold it for 20, hold it for 30. And then eventually you find out that you don't even get angry anymore. So I realized that first and foremost, there are some conversations I don't have till about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. No, I don't reach certain meals before that, because after I sleep, I'm much more adaptable and much more balanced to deal with certain things. Okay. At certain times of the night, you realize that you're much more susceptible to being stressed out. And so times like that, you avoid certain situations, all right? Until you've built a certain toughness, a resilience to deal with it, where it doesn't matter when they throw at you. And based on the jobs that the job you're doing or where you work, you may want to be mindful of these things as well, right? You need to learn to take feedback from your colleagues, from your peers, from your friends, who will let you know if they think you're becoming much more emotionally intelligent, if they think you're much more balanced, you're much more tempered in your dealing with them. And that feedback should allow you to also consistently grow and manage your emotions. And then finally, you need to find a scale to measure it so you know whether you're doing better. So like I said, one example was, it takes me 10 minutes to respond now, or every time that I'm responding, I take about 5 minutes to reflect, think through it, make sure that I'm tempered before I respond. Things like that. Measure, and then you continue to improve. So I've talked about why emotional intelligence is important. I've talked about what it is. I've talked about how to start your journey of emotional intelligence. Now, when is the time to start being emotional intelligent? Now. Where do you practice emotional intelligence? Everywhere. With who? Everyone. It is critical as a person to manage your emotions well. It is critical as a risk person to manage your emotions well. It is even more critical as a leader to manage your emotions well, because it gives you much more productivity and it reduces your risk of taking actions that you cannot take back, or taking actions that are detrimental to you, your people, and your organization. Like I said, I want to keep it short. So at this point, I'm going to pause and take questions. Otherwise, I'll throw some questions your way and we can make this a bit more interactive for the last 27 minutes. Do I still have you online? Hello, can anybody hear me? Okay, so I see Sheila typed in, so she must have heard me. All right, let me start picking some people. Reggie?
Okay, Papa, I'm here. I had to let the host unmute me.
Okay.
Yes, so
I want to know if there are any questions or any comments or any thoughts, any disputes. Maybe I said something that somebody doesn't agree with me. I would love to hear it.
I have a question actually.
Okay.
When it comes to women leaders,
Sheila, you've gone off phone.
how do women balance leadership and being emotionally intelligent? Because sometimes when you are too much in tune with your emotions, you are known to be a weak leader. So how do you find that right balance where you are listening to people, you are not reacting, and you are being emotionally intelligent and showing empathy, but at the same time, people are not thinking of you as being a weak leader?
All right. So, you know, the votes, the polls that we did, where 30%, 31% of the people said they've never had terrible bosses. Here's the interesting thing. And I'd like everybody to read the book Multipliers, which talks about Diminishers, which are people who kill your talent. Multipliers, which are people who build your talent. And then accidental diminishers, who are people who kill your talent without even knowing that they're killing your talent because they're good guys. Same thing with emotional intelligence. There are some terrible bosses that everybody thinks are nice guys, but actually train us to be emotionally flawed. So this whole concept of emotions being a women thing, first and foremost, secondly, seen as weakness, is actually a very flawed way of thinking. Because first and foremost, the codification is wrong. And this is there's something that in the future, I hope, a project that I hope I can do, like write a book on the codification of emotions or a discussion around it, because I don't think that emotions have been codified well enough. And there's a problem with that, you know. So sometimes when you ask somebody if they're happy and they tell you they are not, there's a whole variation between being happy and angry. But because a lot of people lack the vocabulary, if they say they're not happy, automatically we put them at the extreme, which is either middle or angry, right? But there's a whole lot of variations between being ticked off, being worried, being anxious, being perturbed, all the way to being angry, right? And when you don't know how to use that vocabulary, it can quickly escalate a situation. It's the same with emotion. So just because somebody is empathetic doesn't mean that the person is too emotional. We tend to use words like, oh, she's a woman, she's too emotional. It is wrong. What is too emotional, right? Too emotional is actually supposed to be, well, maybe you say too much of everything is bad, but being very in tune with your emotions is actually a good thing. The problem is not being in tune. The problem is your response. And actually, if that response is a reaction. So emotions are bad when you don't manage them and they manage you. So for example, there's a situation and you react to it. And you react to it in a way where you did not expect. And so you have to end up apologizing all the time. So if you're a leader and you always get angry and you always find yourself having to apologize, or in some cases when the leaders are not humble, they don't even apologize, then you have an emotional problem. And it's not because you're a woman, it's just because you're not emotionally intelligent, right? And vice versa, right? The problem is men have found a way of tagging women with this, that even when, before they even have a chance to defend themselves, they are already being seen that way, right? And I think it's important, instead of defending or being defensive about it, to ensure that you're emotionally intelligent, to own it, because it's actually a strength, right? So I believe the best leaders are empathetic, whether women or men. The best leaders are in tune, whether women or men. But using your emotional intelligence should not negate your logical faculties or your intellectual quotient. So you may feel sorry for somebody because you empathize with them, but if you realize that the person is always taking a piss repetitively and it's affecting the organization, you should still be able to put the hammer down in an empathetic way. For example, this person has an issue at home and is consistently affecting work. You may empathize with them and try to find them solutions. And eventually, if you're not finding a solution, you may have to fire them because the consequences to the office are detrimental. As a leader, you do not have the right to let everybody else suffer because of this one person. But empathy dictates that you should still try to figure out how to help that person because you care about them as a human being. And you need to be able to find that balance. And emotional intelligence is not just finding that balance, it's also making the right decision, looking at all the different angles, and going home and being able to sleep at night. Because if you're going with these emotions buried on you and you're emotional about it and it affects you, then that is also a problem. So I don't think the issue is really being a woman, but more an issue of when you're somebody who is in tune with emotions, being comfortable enough to wield your intelligence of those emotions, not react but respond, intelligently weigh it, and use it as a way of influencing, as a way of building morale, as a way of being affiliative rather than letting it become something that others use as a weapon to drag you down. Now, I don't know if Sheila, I don't know if that sort of
yes, that I think that answers my question. Since we don't have any questions, I would like to ask another one.
Please go ahead.
There's a question in the chat box.
Oh, okay, so let's go ahead with that one instead.
Okay. How can we use emotional intelligence to help a colleague who's always rude and has a bad attitude towards work? There's a limit to which empathy can help, you know. Cowbell, let me quickly say this. Empathy is putting yourself in somebody's shoes, okay? Empathy doesn't mean I understand, or empathy doesn't mean you should let things fly, or empathy doesn't mean you always give the person a long rope. It is putting yourself in somebody's shoes. So you can put yourself in somebody's shoes and say, you know what, this person is being irresponsible. When I put them in their shoes, they're being irresponsible. You can also put yourself in somebody's shoes and say, you know what, this person has a tendency to be entitled, and let me deal with them as such. But empathy also allows you to see that maybe it's from their background, so I have a role to train them or coach them or guide them. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily allow it. The problem here is not your lack of empathy. Empathy is good. The problem here is your ability to communicate effectively, to persuade the person to reflect on what they are doing. So there are strategies for dealing with conflict, first and foremost, if somebody is being rude. There are strategies for forcing self-reflection. There are strategies for getting people to look at themselves and realize that they are a problem. Sometimes it requires an intervention. Sometimes it requires finding other people that the person respects to let them know that you are rude. Sometimes it requires just a discussion. So first and foremost, when somebody is rude to you, the last thing you want to do is react, okay? Hey, you, why would you do such a stupid thing? Excuse my French. Your best reaction is not, why did you call me stupid? You two are stupid. Everything starts to burn, right? Maybe your response after you've calmed down and reflected is, I made a mistake, or this is an alternative way to do it. It doesn't mean it's stupid. Can you please readdress it? Or I feel offended that you're calling what I'm doing stupid. I don't think it's really necessary. You see, what this does is, one, it does not attack the person, but it focuses on how you feel, which is very important for avoiding conflict. Two, it gets the person to see a different perspective, which is your perspective about the situation. And three, instead of keeping it at a level of, egos, and it brings the person to that human level of also understanding that you have a viewpoint, right? So there are ways of managing these things. But before you can even manage them, you have to empathize. Let me give you an example. If you know somebody that you, in your mind, automatically you think, this person doesn't like me, they are speaking rudely to me because they hate me, the way you react versus, oh, this person just doesn't know how to talk. I have an opportunity here to help guide them to speak better. You see the difference? One is the conclusion you arrive at because you're empathizing with the person. The other is because you've not put yourself in their shoes, you only see the negative and how you feel. So empathy just allows you to see things from other people's point of view and to find a holistic 360-degree view to respond as opposed to reactive. So please, by all means, if the person is rude, address it. But the way you address it with empathy is you found a more holistic way to get the person to see things from your point of view and own it, as opposed to attacking each other and not getting any resolution. I hope that helps. I don't know if, yeah, there's another question here. Yes.
Hi, Papa.
Hi, Amma.
Okay, so I have two questions. I think you tackled the first one. I wanted to know when do you draw the line between empathy and someone who is always repeating what you are trying to empathize with them? And I think you partially explained, so I think I'm okay on that part. But my second one has to do with resilience. How do you explain that?
I'll recommend a book for you. I think it's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's
Okay.
Grit, yeah. If you Google Grit, you'll find it, yeah. But resilience is really your ability to adapt to certain situations and your ability to toughen out certain situations that you may not be comfortable with. Emotional intelligence is important for resilience because a lot of times we fall or crumble in certain situations because we do not understand it, all right? So a lot of us, when we're kids, somebody teases you and then you come back and you're crying, right? But the reason you were crying was because you say the person has teased you and they've offended you. But a lot of times when you talk through it, there's no even reason for you to even be offended. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was in the US, there were these friends of mine, Afro-Americans, that used to tease me. And they used to tease me with this movie, Amistad. So they see me and then they laugh and go like, they hold out their hands. Give me free, trying to use this very thick, African accent that the Hollywood likes to use. And they'll be laughing. And then one day I sat with them and I said, it's really interesting. You guys are always trying to tease me with Amistad. But the truth is, my ancestors were still in Africa. Amistad is more likely your ancestors are related to you than they are to me. And then all of a sudden, he gave me this weird look like, actually, you're right. And then we laughed about it. But here's the thing. If I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, they tease me and then I get angry and then they always feel like, okay, we've got something to give him a punch about, but I never really reflected. A lot of times, resilience is about anytime you're in a particular situation, asking yourself or analyzing yourself and saying, can I deal with it better? So you're a lady among men, okay? And they are always making funny jokes or always, poking, stabs at you, right? Maybe you're a young lady among older men, okay? And they're always poking jabs at you. They're always trying to tear you down. Now, you can get emotional, feel bullied, and get stressed out and always angry. Or you could empathize and realize that, wait a minute, these guys are in their 50s, 60s. When they were 30, they hadn't achieved half what I'd achieved. I must be making them nervous. I must be making them feel underachieved. And so this is their reaction to it. How do I get them, to see things from a different point of view and not see me as a threat? All of a sudden, you now have power as opposed to consistently reacting because you took a moment to empathize. And that just made you more resilient. So resilience is your ability to toughen situations and adapt to different situations that hit you. But to do that, you need the power of reflection, self-awareness, and the ability to manage the emotions that you go through as you go through that turmoil. I don't know if that answers your question, Amma. I don't know if Amma can still hear me.
Okay. I don't think she's on, but I'm sure when she comes on, she'll send a message.
I'm on. I think I was muted, so I couldn't speak. I think I'm okay with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Rich asked the question. He says, what's the difference between emotional intelligence and empathy? Empathy is actually part of emotional intelligence, Richard. When you look at the 5 domains, as explained beautifully by Daniel Goleman, and now he makes it 4 domains of emotional intelligence. There's self-awareness, there's self-management, there's empathy, there's your ability to motivate, which is in some and not in some. And then the other one is relationship management. That's how you deal with people. So empathy is actually part of the domains of emotional intelligence. It's a critical or a core part of emotional intelligence. I hope that answers your question, Rich. I have a question. It says, what are some of the common barriers to developing emotional intelligence, and how can they be overcome? Well, you cannot develop emotional intelligence if you are not reflective. So the first thing is for you to reflect. In fact, no. Let me say this. He who knows that he does not know and is willing to learn is wise. He who knows not, but knows not that he does not know, there's a saying that he's a fool. I don't mean to insult anybody, but the truth is, the most difficult issue with emotional intelligence is when people think they have it when they don't have it. I think that's the biggest barrier. When people already think that, oh, as for me, I'm emotionally intelligent, and they're done, and they're not willing to even reflect. That is already a problem. That's a big barrier. That person already, there's an issue. Well, as for me, I'm emotionally intelligent, right? So when the person is not willing to reflect, when the person lacks empathy, and some people are much more empathetic than other people. Some people really lack empathy, right? When the person is not reflective, when the person doesn't know how to take feedback, when the person is not circumspect, like they don't understand situations. And it's actually crazy how unempathetic a lot of us are without even realizing it. Little things like you're parking and maybe the way you've parked, somebody else can't fit in. Little things like you're crossing a line, knowing that other people are waiting. Little things like being late to a meeting. Little things like pushing somebody aside so you can get in first, forgetting that person also has to get in early. Little things like you're in a group and you're posting a lot of things and forgetting that other people need a chance to also post. Little things like that, and a lot of times when you become more empathetic, you become more reflective of that, and you realize that you make more friends and you become, closer to other people. But the truth is, when you don't give yourself the chance to do that, that can be a barrier. The second one is when you don't have good friends around you who give you good feedback. That also can be a barrier. So when you have people who are always telling you you're the best, you're good, you're great, and they're not giving you true, honest feedback, that can be a barrier to emotional intelligence as well. The third one is when people reflect more on praising you for your intellectual quotient, for your IQ, than taking time to understand you for your EQ. That can be an emotional barrier. Sometimes ultra competitiveness without, a balance can also be a barrier to emotional intelligence. Sometimes those you are modeling after, when they are not emotionally intelligent, like the leaders that you have, when they are not emotionally intelligent and they praise things that are more, lack emotional perspective, things that are more like a bully culture, it can be a barrier to becoming emotionally intelligent. So I hope that answers the questions for that question. Let me see here.
I think we had another question. Just checking. The person said, how do you draw the balance so you do not suffer compassion fatigue as a leader or even a health professional? So as a health professional.
Compassion fatigue. I like that. First and foremost, let's not confuse compassion with empathy. That's the first thing. Emotional intelligence means understanding what you can handle and taking care of yourself. So as a health professional, first and foremost, you need to have compassion. Or as any charity work or anybody who does care work, compassion is very important. But you need to be conscious of the fact that you have a limited bucket. And you need to also care about yourself. Okay? So as much as we don't encourage you to be selfish, and we encourage you to be selfless, we also expect you to take care of yourself, which means you need to know the limit that you can handle in a day. You need to know the bucket that you have, and that bucket has to be replenished, which means if you have a traumatic day the day before and the next day you're not ready emotionally, You don't rush in. That's why in the police force, when you shoot somebody, you know, they give you leave, and then they take you to a psychological evaluation before you come back, because you understand that it's a traumatic experience, right? And when you're compassionate, sometimes certain situations can be traumatic for you. And if you're not emotionally aware of the damage that is doing to you, you can end up hurting somebody or overreacting or rather exploding, right? So I'm going to share this with you. Some of you know about this, some of you don't. I didn't know about it. In fact, before I became emotionally aware and before I even traveled to Korea, if anybody had told me this, I'll tell them that, you know, they're talking nonsense, excuse me to say. But luckily for me, I experienced it, right? So there was a time when I almost felt like I was going to die. And I used to have a lot of people who loved to talk to me because I was somebody who listened and paid attention and made them feel better. So they always left saying, Papa, you made me feel great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But then something started happening to me I didn't understand. And I started waking up. Now, I mean, I'm somebody that even when I lost my mother, I mean, I didn't really cry much. You know, I was taught, or I was raised in a way you bottle up, you know, your emotions. But I used to cry at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm weeping. And it didn't make any sense to me because I wasn't that type of person. I said, what's going on here? Why am I getting all soft and mopey and everything? It was just driving me nuts. And I was so depressed and I was so sad. And my logic kicked in. So my logic said, what has happened to me? Am I in trouble? Why am I so down? Why am I so low? But I couldn't logically figure it out. I had this friend called Christine. She amazed me. I told her about this. And I'm even happy that I had the courage and to be vulnerable and tell it, because it was something I was embarrassed about. And Christine said, it's the people you're listening to. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're an empath and you don't even know it. And because you're an empath, you're picking up people's energies and you don't know how to channel it out. So it's draining you. Okay. So that all these energies that I was helping them release and feel happy about was sitting on my chest, and I was soaking them, and I didn't know how to channel them out. So guess what? It was killing me. Right. And if you don't know this as a leader and you're an empath, that's one way to kill yourself. Right? Because if you don't know how to channel it out, you may soak. And as somebody who's compassionate, if you're somebody who carries that and don't know how to channel it away, and there are different ways of channeling. I remember I watched a TEDx talk. I wish I had the link here, where this lady talked about how to address death. And it was a beautiful TEDx talk because she even spoke about how this leader explained death to somebody who was dying, for the person to embrace it and be happy that she was dying. You know, it takes that understanding for you to move from fear and distraught and depression to acceptance, right? And your ability to have acceptance is one way to also deal with compassion. So the person is suffering, right? Looking at things perspective. And I think for me, my trigger was when my mom died. You know, the day they told me my mom died, the first reaction was, this woman loved God. God, why would you take her? Like out of the blue. There was nothing wrong with her. She just went boom. And then this other trigger came in and said, maybe because it's a good thing. Like look at it look at the silver lining. Maybe it was a good thing. Maybe this is rest. Maybe this is a good time. Thank you, God. You know, that was the reaction. And at that moment, I started accepting and understanding and looking at silver linings in every situation, right? But if you don't have acceptance and you carry it as a burden, then it buries you. So for people that are compassionate, learn to deal with it. If you can't deal with it, find somebody that can help you through it. Talk to a counselor, talk to a psychologist, you know, talk to a therapist to help you in dealing with that energy that you pull. Because if you don't have a way of dissipating it, then you're going to get in trouble. And yes, you're going to get burnt out. So you should be able to be compassionate and still walk away and smile. Because being emotionally intelligent is understanding that situation I was compassionate about is sitting on my chest and it's not good for me. And if I want to take care of my children and my family and myself, I need to learn to leave it at the office. All right. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, you have to be emotionally intelligent enough to know when it's becoming a burden for you and to let go or find help to help you to channel it somewhere else.
Okay. Papa, I think we have 2 more questions, so we can take that and then wrap up.
All right, sounds good. Sheila, my questions are, somebody quickly drop the third one. My questions are how often can we check in on our EQ level, not in a competitive sense? I think you should do it every day. I mean, it's EQ, there are tests for it, but there are psychometric tests that are self-reflective. So really it's you doing it. I mean, and there are a couple of, maybe I can share some with Sheila, but the truth is really it's up to you. So like I said, create your own metric and find a way to journal. I would say journal daily. I would say reflect daily, because it really takes just one wrong move, one wrong surge of multiple emotions to let you go over the bender. So for me, I'll say often enough, daily if you can. And don't think so much about the level. Think just about being better than you were yesterday. Like you said, it's not competitive. So just be better than you were yesterday and continue to improve and continue to become more intelligent emotionally, right? Question from Kineben is, can individual difference influence emotional intelligence? If yes, how can we navigate these differences effectively? When you say individual difference, what do you mean? If you mean just people being different, do you have any EI tips for an unassertive person? If you mean just being different, hold on, I didn't answer this in line. So, Sheila, my question now.
So you actually spoke about the EQ tests, and you also spoke about checking in on our EQ levels.
Yeah, exactly. So the EQ tests, like I said, are behavioral. They depend on a lot of things. They are effective, but it's also very important that you're not thinking too much. So sometimes when we're thinking too much and we want a certain outcome, it can bias the results that we get, right? So you need to yourself learn to also have a balance when you're answering these questions without any presumptions or without any ideal that you're trying to get. So some people want to feel that they're emotionally intelligent, so they answer the questions in certain ways, trying to game it, right? So in that case, then it'll be biased, right? It's subjective to a certain extent, but the general idea is just keep doing it consistently so that you get better at it, right? Rather than trying to get a high score immediately so you can compete with it, right? I think individual differences, yes, different people. So some people have a natural predisposition for being empathetic, okay? Some too have a very natural predisposition for being bland when it comes to connecting with people. So yes, that difference makes a difference. So that person who's naturally empathetic will probably be a lot more emotionally intelligent naturally and will need less work than the person who is totally unempathetic, right? There's some people too who are naturally reflective. Others are just totally clueless when it comes to reflecting on themselves. Like they're totally oblivious. They will need more work. Sometimes culture too, not just individuals. So those from like the Asian culture, from Confucius teaching, like the Chinese, some of the Koreans and things like that, they come from a culture which is very reflective and very community-based. People like that tend to be a lot more emotionally intelligent than other people who come from places that they don't. So I'll give you 2 scenarios. In Korea, for example, when somebody bumps into you, they don't say sorry. They just move on. Why? Because culturally, they feel that they're sorry. So they even see the point in even telling you they're sorry. They just move on and expect that you know that they're sorry. When they are foreigners, a lot of times it's hard to adjust to that, but it is what it is. The second one is, I don't know if you know, but the only certain president I know who killed himself out of guilt was a Korean president, because his wife, he was fighting against corruption and his wife took a bribe and he basically jumped out of his presidential window. Obviously, he could have been a bit more emotionally intelligent in the sense that, he could have realized that also killing himself was also affecting the entire country. But you know what I'm saying? They're a lot more reflective. They're a lot more, deep and consequential when it comes to honor and things like that. I had a friend, actually my gym trainer, his very good friend was broke and couldn't take care of his wife and children. So he had a gun, but instead of killing himself with his gun, he didn't do that. He poured fuel on himself and burnt himself because he felt that he had failed and he didn't deserve to die easily. So he had to suffer to die. That is, for me, it's a lack of emotional intelligence, but it's also a sense of deep self-reflection, right? That requires a bit of emotional intelligence. But yeah, So the individual does make sense. Cultures make a difference, and also the companies and corporate culture makes a difference as to how different people are with emotional intelligence and how they're not. But everybody can get there. It's just that some start further than other people. How do you have, oh, it seems like the questions are increasing more. Can individual differences, do you have any EI tips for an unassertive person? EI has nothing to do with being assertive or unassertive. It's really a reflective thing, it's an in-depth thing, right? So if you're an unassertive person, you need to ensure that the assertive people around you, yes, they may be assertive and they may assert their authority and their thoughts, but you need to manage your emotions to kick back a wall. So you need to have your happy place where you can soak without internalizing, right? You need to learn to do that. You need to learn to ensure that just because you've heard it, it doesn't mean it has to sink in. You need to manage, and you need to also find more colorful ways of communicating. So I, for example, had this mentee who's very quiet, very unassertive, but she could be in a loud room and still get everybody to quiet down without screaming, okay? And that is finding your voice and finding your power. You need to find your space. And look, everybody is powerful, believe it or not, whether you're unassertive, whether you're assertive, whether you're loud, whether you're soft, everybody's powerful. The problem is most people mimic other people. So there's nothing sad than somebody who's unassertive trying to mimic somebody who's assertive because they think they have much more power, or somebody who's soft trying to mimic somebody who's loud because they think they have much more power. The problem is people don't take time to get to know themselves. They're trying to mimic other people. And that's why we find ourselves in this situation where we think that what we are is not good enough. But when you find your power, though unassertive, you can still walk into a room and there's presence and take over. So what I would say is become more emotionally intelligent, but definitely also start to find yourself and find your power, your natural power. And you realize that it doesn't matter, right? How do you demonstrate empathy to your team member if he's not ready to speak? There are different ways of showing empathy. One clear example is when somebody's not, and I think those in relationships will understand this, when the person is not ready to speak, you need to be able to give them time. You need to be able to be silent with them. You need to be able to let them know through your body language that I am here for you and I respect that you're not ready to speak. Even the fact of trying to speak when the person doesn't want to speak, it's a selfish thing. You see what I'm saying? So being empathetic and understanding the person doesn't want to speak, sometimes it requires just being quiet with them, just being there with them, just being quiet and being there till they are ready to speak, right? And so it's not always you have to talk to them to know that yet. Sometimes just letting them know, just sitting back, just being silent. You know, I've been to places where people are sick or they've lost somebody, and I just look at them. We just walk in, they look at me, they're crying, I look at them, I smile, and that's it. And the whole time I was there, I never even said anything. And they understand, right? So sometimes it's not every time that you have to say something, right? You need to know how to respect what they feel and give them time to come out, right? And that's also being empathetic. What does one do when your tolerance and empathy is taken for granted? So there are a number of things. One, you may be assuming that it's being taken for granted. Maybe they don't even realize it. Maybe you think you're being empathetic, they can't see. So that's one. Two, maybe the person is just being difficult and they're testing your limits. I always believe in having a polite but frank conversation about how you feel. Remember, there are key things I'm saying here. One, frank. Two, polite. Three, how you feel. And when you talk about how you feel, it's about words like, this is how I feel, this is what I see it, this is my perspective. It ensures that you're not attacking the person. It ensures that you're not positioning or you're not asserting your thoughts on them, but you're giving them room to reflect and see where you're coming from, right? So I feel like I'm being taken for granted. Example one, example two, example three. What are your thoughts on it? And then you give them room to also defend themselves, right? Yeah. But the first thing is to address what it is that you think the problem is. Now, remember, when you journal and you're reflecting and you're going down the line, you may also realize that what you think is the person taking you for granted is actually a secondary trigger to a primary trigger that you've not even realized. So For example, maybe your idea of somebody taking you for granted is every time that, okay, so I'll give you an example. There are some people, every time you go to their house, they say, oh, you've met me, come and eat, right? But then you, whenever you go to their house, they never invite you. So you say they're taking your kindness for granted, or they're taking your empathy for granted. Maybe they don't even think about it. Culturally, they just don't believe in somebody putting their hands in their food. So they're very different, right? But instead of understanding their difference, you've jumped to the fact that when I do it for him, but he's not doing it for me. And you've jumped a lot of steps. When you take time to get to know the person and why they do it and have a conversation, you may realize that what you're thinking is not even the case, right? So sometimes we may think they're taking us for granted, but they don't even have a clue what's going on, or they're not even self-aware. And sometimes bringing it up, they apologize and move on. But conversations are always the best way to start working or addressing these things. Is there a way you can assess your level of emotional intelligence? You can do it through online tests like they said, or some other tests out there. But for me, a quick caveat I'll give you is, and this is the simplest thing I can give you, if you ever find yourself reacting rather than responding, or if you ever find yourself being led by your emotions where you felt like you were not in control, you still have a lot of work to do in emotional intelligence, and you need to work at it. That's all I'm going to say. That's the best answer I can give you. All right, Sheila, I think I've answered all the questions.
Yes, you have. Thank you so much, Papa. I think in the beginning, I wasn't quite, people didn't hear me when I introduced you, so I'd like to do that again. Papa Arkhurst is a connector, an optimizer, and a leadership enthusiast.
An optimistizer, she's avoiding the word. Let me explain what it is.
Optimistizer.
Yeah,
It looked like
a word
the
I
same
coined,
word.
it's a word I coined, which basically means that sowing as in SOW, sowing optimism in people. I believe that most of our problems are because people lack optimism. So an optimistizer or optimistizing people is basically showing a lot of optimism in the world, or hope. Yeah.
Okay, so beyond emotional intelligence today, I've learned a new word as well. As a connector, he has established platforms such as Mehima, a female-only platform with over 200 professional women leaders, or Hineba, a male-only platform, and Tech Connect to bring like-minded individuals together to create support systems and space for progressive engagement, and continues to connect people and businesses with ideas and opportunities. As an optimistizer, I just use your word, who's always dealing with hope and advocating for optimistization, a word he coined for sowing optimism into individuals he engages with. As an optimizer, he optimizes through regular coaching, facilitated training sessions, mentoring passionate individuals, spanning rising leaders to the C-suites. And as a leadership enthusiast and a corporate trainer, he has worked with several institutions like GIMPA and has facilitated both training and coaching sessions in the area of business continuity, communication, presentation skills, leadership development, creativity and innovation, problem solving, and other critical soft skills areas. He's an accomplished communicator, a TEDx speaker, who in 2017 was recognized by the Speakers Bureau as one of the top 100 influential speakers in Ghana. There's so much on your profile, so I think I will stop here. But Papa, thank you so much for having this discussion with us. This is the first of our leadership series, and we are happy we had you on board because the learning has just been amazing. For me, I journal once in a while, but then from what I've learned today, I know that I'm going to be doing it daily, and I'm going to be incorporating a lot more questioning and a lot more reflection into my journaling. And I think you spoke about having an emotions journal where you talk about your range of emotions. And I think that's one thing that most of us don't quite do, because all we know is the very basic emotions. I am angry, I'm happy, I'm upset. But then when it comes to what you spoke about, I've seen that before you get to upset, which might be very red, or angry, there are different ranges that we can actually use to also explain how we feel. And then one last thing I learned was about the primary and secondary triggers, because like you said, sometimes we think that we are upset or we are having a certain emotion because of what someone has done. But then it might be a deeper emotion, or there might be a deeper trigger that we haven't even quite admitted to ourselves, or we haven't even noticed about ourselves. So I've learned a lot. I know that everyone else has learned a lot. If we had more time, we would have done more and we would have delved deeper into this topic. But then for starters, we just want to say thank you to you for coming on board. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And we know that this is something that people pay a lot for, but we got for free. And we are hoping that we'll be getting a lot more sessions with you. So thank you so much, Papa.
Sheila, thank you too, and thank you for the opportunity. I see that there are some gentlemen and ladies who sound like they are, okay, well, I saw one gentleman, I don't know, he sound like they want to join Mehima or Hineba. Please hook them up.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so if I have their names, they can just put it in the chat box. We will take account of it and then we'll connect them with you.
Okay, no problem.
At a fee.
So can I jump off now?
So actually, it's a free platform, so no fees. You were saying?
No, I was asking, can I jump off now?
Yes, thank you so much for coming on board. And to everyone who came on board today, we are very happy to have you. This is the first of our leadership series, and we'll be having this series twice every month, one technical session and one soft skills session. We hope that we'll have you in our subsequent leadership series as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Please drop your names or your email address, your contact addresses if you want to be contacted to join Mehima. If you also, or Hineba, if you also want to join WLIAfrica, you are welcome. You can join as a member, as a mentor, or as an ally. The ally is for the males who still want to support females into leadership and insurance. You are very much welcome. We have membership forms we can share with you. So if you are interested, please drop your email address and we'll share all the links with you. Some of you are asking for the recording of this video. We will share the recording with you. And you can also join our LinkedIn and our Instagram pages, as well as our YouTube pages. We'll be sharing all those links with you. And once you do that, you have access to this recording and the notes that we are going to be making from the recording. So there are lots of links that Papa spoke about. There are lots of books that he spoke about and some models that we will also like to share with you so that you can, and even the test, the EQ test as well, so that you can also go back and then reflect and then see how you can practicalize this session. So thank you so much for coming on board. We're going to leave the Zoom session running for a few more minutes so that we can get all the email addresses and all the contact numbers. And in the course of next week, you'll be getting some further information on us, on how to join Mehima, how to join Ohiniba, how to join WLIAfrica, and how to have access to the recordings as well as the links to the TEDx speeches and all the books. Thank you so much for coming on board today and have a lovely evening.